I think I mentioned a story, like a case study earlier. These were just 13-year-old girls, but they were young teens. They were at a sleepover with their friends. There were about 6 of them, and one girl brought mollies, or what's called ecstasy, which are, like uppers, and passed them around. And one girl, for whatever reason, began convulsions, and she died at the party. They had no idea what they were doing. It could have been, it could have been candy. It could have been anything, but it's just they didn't know.
By the year 2000, cocaine was the most frequently reported drug in the United States. Since then, synthetic drugs have taken over the market, from semi-synthetic oxycodone to fully synthetic drugs like methamphetamine and fentanyl. Synthetic drugs are made from artificial chemicals opposed to natural ingredients. Since they are easier and cheaper to come by, distributors have begun incorporating drugs like fentanyl into their products without telling their customers. This allows suppliers to cut costs and make a bigger profit, all at the expense of their unsuspecting users.
The reward, whatever it may be, it's going to be super short term, but the risk can potentially be your life. And especially like nowadays, drugs have so many different variants, so many different people are producing them. They're using so many different things to make their product the best product, which is making it really dangerous for its users because sometimes they go too far, and that's when an overdose happens.
I do have some family friends who, they're on the younger side, and they got some stuff from a friend, and it was laced. It's just really scary to think about how literally anything can be laced now, especially with fentanyl, because it's just so small and so fatal.
I don't think there's been a cop in this area that hasn't dealt with fentanyl use. It's definitely the fastest growing, most potent drug that we've dealt with as a police force. Whenever we have an overdose, it's most likely caused by fentanyl. We carry Narcan now because we deal with it so often.
There's a medication called Narcan that maybe even more schools should have on hand. This Narcan can revive someone that's going into failure and pretty quickly and save their lives.
We take classes on how to administer Narcan and hopefully bring those people back because overdoses have definitely gone through the roof in the Bay Area.
I think a lot of people don't really think about how dangerous things actually are because it's just so normalized, in the Bay Area especially.
If someone has a reaction, the smartest thing they can do is get somebody to take them to an emergency room immediately. You don't need your parents, just get to the emergency room. Call 911, because your life could depend on it. Almost anything can be laced with fentanyl. Opiates, blunts, joints, e-cigarettes. Oftentimes nobody knows it's there. And oftentimes it's put in by a dealer or someone that's made some of these synthetic drugs to lift the high a little to make people want to go get more of that. But there's no guarantee how much there is in there and how much you take, and it can lead to sudden death.
You think you're getting Xanax or something, but realistically it's half of it is just fentanyl. And it's there's no way out,
These people aren't scientists that are manufacturing this drug. So let's say I had a big thing of powder right here and I pour some fentanyl in there and I mix it, right? It's not going to be mixed evenly. You know what I mean? So a portion of that batch is going to have more fentanyl in it than, let's say, another portion of that batch, right? And depending on which pill of the batch you get, results are going to vary.
One of the points, with fentanyl especially, that I try to get out there is it only takes 2 milligrams to cause death, which is in grains of salt. That's 2 or 3 grains of salt. That's nothing.
Our parents, our grandparents experimented. Maybe it was just with cigarettes or maybe beer or at parties or whatever, or drinking and driving. But all generations have this phenomenon of experimenting.
I don't think I know anybody who hasn't tried stuff, it's insane. And so it's where are people getting it and how safe is it, you know?
Just remember that like you don't necessarily know where the drugs are coming from. You don't know who's making the drugs. The person making the drugs' goal is to get your money, right? They're not necessarily worried about your health. They're not necessarily worried about what happens to you after you buy their drug. Their goal is to sell you the drug and for you to use it, and they're going to move on to the next customer because someone's always going to be trying to buy it, right? So a short period of potential happiness is not worth the risk of you possibly dying.
The youth has always experimented with drugs, but this time the suppliers are experimenting too. Reporting for Scott Center News, this is Sophia Mattioli.